So some of the least healthy people in medicine aren't in the waiting room. They're the ones running the practice, right? So if you're a clinician, that might even include you, even if your last set of labs came back completely normal. Now think about how strange that is for a second. The people that were trained to catch this in everyone else are the last people to catch this in themselves. You read labs all day, but nobody is sitting there reading yours. And it didn't start when you began practicing. It started the day you walked into your training, right? Think back to all of those years. You pulled shifts that were over 24 hours in a row. You pushed through the very exhaustion that you know is detrimental to your health. And somewhere during that time, you learned the rules, right? The person who worked more, who stayed later, and who never was the one who let it show, that's the one that everybody admired. Needing rest in your mind was a weakness. Exhaustion wasn't a warning sign, it was a badge, right? And you got so good at ignoring what your body was telling you that eventually you stopped hearing it at all. And no one ever taught you how to turn that off. So you did it, right? You carried it out through your training and straight into your practice. The hours never really got any shorter. The stakes only got higher, and you told yourself that you would get to your own health once things finally slowed down. But your body has been keeping score this entire time. And one day, it stops letting you ignore it. It tells you, right? I know exactly how this goes because this happened exactly to me. A little over a year ago, I went to see a cardiologist because I had uncovered a genetic mutation that predisposes me to a heart condition called arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy. So I wanted my heart looked at, right? He did a full cardiac workup. We did cardiac MRI. We did an echo. We did continuous cardiac monitoring. We did labs, the whole nine. And he told me that I was perfectly healthy. But deep down, I knew he was wrong, right? For starters, I was 40 pounds overweight. I was heavier than I had ever been in my entire life. At that point, I had fragmented sleep, anhedonia, fatigue, social withdrawal, mood disturbances, GI disturbances, right? I even had this intermittent myalgia that would only occur in my left calf. It would come and go, ebbs and flow, right? Even when I could get those nights of sleep, I would inevitably be woken up because my daughter at the time, you know the story, would need additional care at all hours of the night. So on average, I was only sleeping maybe 2 to 4 hours every single night. And to be quite frank, I was busy. So what did I do? I ordered takeout. I ate a lot of processed food. I was eating a surplus of calories at that point in my life. And because of all this, because I was so busy, because I was doing this, because I was doing that, I stopped exercising, right? I stopped working out, stopped going to the gym. And what I was doing was I was really dedicating every single waking hour at that time, researching ways to help my daughter. But I also went back to school. I also continued to run Medgeeks, the company. And still, according to this cardiologist, I was healthy, right? The standard workup that he was running, the labs that he ran, didn't catch any of it because my lipids looked good, my fasting glucose was fine, nothing was flagged, and he sent me home telling me that there was nothing to worry about. And to be quite honest with you, just like you might have experienced, I didn't notice these changes happening in real time, right? The changes felt so gradual that I just kind of slipped into this new version of myself without any real semblance of what I used to be or who I used to be or what I used to feel. And to be quite frank, to put it bluntly, it was very simple. I was burnt out and I just didn't feel healthy. I couldn't describe it per se, but I didn't feel 100%, right? Regardless of what all the labs said. So I ran my own labs. I did my own testing. And it turns out I was actually insulin resistant and I also had nutritional deficiencies. Now, as you can see, I didn't gain 40 pounds by just sitting on the couch. Yes, I did eat a surplus of food and the processed food, but I built up that weight. I gained that weight the same way a lot of you clinicians, a lot of you physicians, right, are building your own practice by grinding and telling yourself that the cost is worth it because there's always somebody who needs me more, right? And taking care of myself, well, that could wait. And the whole time, by conventional standards, I was considered to be fine. And that gap is exactly what I want to talk about right now. That space between what the labs flagged and what my body was actually doing. And I think you're living through that same gap right now, right? Whether your labs admit it or not. Some part of you probably already knows it too. Now, if you're new here, my name is Andrew Reid. I founded Medgeeks back in 2013, and for the last 5 years, I've been rebuilding how I think about health from the cell up. So how does that happen, right? How does a cardiologist look at a man who's 40 pounds overweight, insulin resistant, has nutritional deficiencies, and still tell him that he's healthy, right? And look, it's not really his fault. It's just how the whole system is trained to think. Conventional medicine is built to catch disease, not dysfunction. It isn't looking for insulin resistance. It's waiting for the hyperglycemia that shows up years later once the damage is done. And the line it uses to make that decision is called a reference range. We're all familiar with this, right? A reference range, though, is just a statistical band, right, built around a population that just doesn't have that diagnosed disease. It tells you, or tells the patient, or tells everybody, right, whether you look like most people. It doesn't tell you if you're actually well. It doesn't tell you if you're healthy, if you're thriving, if you're optimized, right? Because look, a fasting glucose of 124 isn't meaningfully better than a glucose of 126. I think we know that. The biology doesn't magically change between those two numbers. The only thing that changes at that point is the label. Now, the dysfunction has been building for years, right? And it builds in every single one of these cases for years before it ever crosses that line. And here's the thing that never clicked for me, and I doubt it ever clicked for you either if you've never really thought about it. The same thing is true on the other side of that line. Because you can sit inside every single normal reference range, but still be quietly falling apart internally, metabolically, right? Tell me if this sounds familiar. You're a clinician. You run your own practice or your own business, right? You carry patients, you carry the payroll, and you have the difficult day-to-day decisions that impact the lives of human beings. For some of you, right, your own labs come back clean every single time, but maybe you still feel off. The energy drains out of you by the time you reach the end of the day, by the time you reach your afternoon patients. Maybe you're foggy, your brain fog, right? By the time you're charting at nighttime. Your recovery takes longer than it used to. And maybe your motivation, your drive seems to kind of ebb and flow depending on the day of the week. Or maybe the labs aren't fine. Maybe you've started to notice that they're slipping, right? You just know you're not at your peak performance state, but you just kind of write it off, right? You write it off as maybe I'm just getting older, maybe it's just stress, no big deal. Eventually, you begin to notice that the state you're living in begins to permeate into other areas of your life. It's those dinners that you're eating standing up, or the dinners you miss completely, right? It's the recital that you watch from the parking lot on your phone in between patients. It's getting home with just enough left in the tank to be in the room, but not really enough to actually be there. And when you do make it home, right, the patients that you spend all day handing out to all of these strangers has run dry. So the people that you love the most get snapped at things that really don't matter. Your kids learn not to bring you the small stuff. Your partner learns not to count on you during the evenings. And none of that was ever a decision that you intentionally made. It just gradually happened, one exhausted night over and over again. Right? That version of you that all your patients get during the day is the best version. And the version that your family gets, though, at nighttime is just whatever's left over. But here's the thing. Your best isn't something you're necessarily proud of. It's just the most that you can give on a body that's already running on empty, right? There's a far sharper, smarter, steadier version of you underneath all of this. Your patients just never got to meet that version of you, right? It doesn't exist in this moment. But maybe you've made peace with all of it. You've called it the price of work, because I know I did too. So let me say the thing that you were never given permission to hear. That belief that you picked up somewhere back in training, that ignoring your own body is what a dedicated clinician does. That taking care of yourself is selfish or soft, or something that you'll get to once everything else and everyone else has been handled. But let me tell you something, that's not dedication. That's just self-neglect, because a depleted clinician is a worse clinician, okay? Your patients, it wears thin. The clinical acumen that you spent years training to sharpen gets dull by 4 o'clock in the afternoon when you're running on just a granola bar and little to no sleep. The people in your waiting room are getting a fraction of what you're capable of, and so is the family that's waiting for you at home. None of that is a character flaw, okay? It's the bill that your ambition has been quietly running up. And let me tell you what I did, because I refused to accept that this was just the way my life is right now. I stopped accepting the word normal. I went looking for what the standard workup wasn't measuring, and I ran the labs that nobody thought to run. That's where the nutritional deficiencies came up. That's where the insulin resistance showed up. Early on, it was bad enough that I couldn't even reach nutritional ketosis. My metabolism essentially stopped responding. And if you watch the last video where I I did a couple of talks regarding fasting, then you'll see that I not only turned things around, but I was able to go into a very deep ketotic state relatively quickly. Now, a year before that, my body couldn't get there at all. And that's the difference that we're talking about. And look, to be honest with you, I didn't get there by crash dieting. I mapped what was actually driving it, and I changed the things that mattered, and I did it in the right order. The weight came off, the insulin resistance resolved, the nutritional deficiencies, they were gone, right? And here's the part that I didn't expect, and here's the part that's really interesting to me. I had carried an autoimmune marker for years. I had an ANA with a titer that was 1 to 320, right? As the weight came off and the insulin resistance resolved, that marker went from 320 to negative. Now, I want to be clear. I didn't set out to treat an autoimmune condition, and I'm not telling you I cured anything. What I'm telling you is when I fixed the environment that my cells were living in, something downstream that I wasn't even chasing moved on its own as well. And if that sounds familiar, it should. The exact same thing happened to my daughter. Her ANA had been positive for years, and it turned negative as well. Now, that's not a coincidence. That's what happens when you stop chasing the label and you start fixing what's actually driving it. And the reason it worked isn't really complicated. The thing that drifts first, right, long before you ever have a diagnosis, is your metabolism, but down at the level of the cell. It's how well your cells are able to turn this fuel into energy. It's how much your body actually has in the tank for the days that you put it through. It doesn't show up as a disease right away because there's no name for the early part of that curve. It shows up as a ceiling. And here's what I need you to hear. You've been mistaking that ceiling for who you are, but it isn't who you are. It's where your body has just drifted. And with the right work, it can actually drift back. So let me tell you what's on the other side of all of this. It isn't about making the labs look better on paper. It's about experiencing a different way of moving through your day. The truth is, your work runs on your ability to think clearly. And that's the first thing that this grind takes from you. The problem is that it happens so gradually, like it did for me, you don't really notice the effects right away. You don't notice it until you're deep in it. When your energy comes back, your focus comes back with it. You stay sharp with your first patient and you stay sharp with your last patient. That's the part that your patients feel the most, even if maybe they don't have a word for it. They can feel it, they experience it. You walk through your own door at night with something left in the tank instead of handing your family whatever the day didn't already take from you. And one evening, your kid, they look at you and they realize that you finally have the energy to be a parent. Right? Not just enough to keep things running until bedtime. Look, I know you became a clinician to take care of people. The most radical thing that you can do is to finally put yourself first. And it's long overdue. Not instead of everyone else, but so that there's actually more of you left for them. And somewhere in there, when you start doing this, you start to feel like yourself again, which after this long, you'd almost forgotten was even possible. That's what I want for you, and that's the whole reason I made this video. I want you to put yourself first. This is just a reminder that self-care is necessary. It is not selfish, okay? If any of this resonated, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments. Tell me where the grind has caught up with you. And before I go, I want to leave you with a core concept. Look, the absence of disease is not the same thing as health. Most of us were trained to treat them as the same thing, but they're not. What I want you to do right now is I want you to picture a line. At one end, we have dysfunction, and it starts quietly, and it changes at the cellular level long before there's anything to name. You give it enough time, eventually it becomes a disease. Eventually, it comes with a label, an ICD code that's attached to that. And that narrow stretch is the only part of that line that conventional medicine is really built to catch. But the line runs this way as well. It runs the other way too, right? Being free of a disease, yes, it's a requirement. It's a requirement for health, but it doesn't define health all by itself. Health is something that you have to build. It's something you have to be proactive in, right? And then past that is the strongest version of you that there's ever been. And I call that resilient health. That's the goal. That's where you're optimizing. That's where you're thriving. There isn't a fixed ceiling to that. And you can go as far in that direction as you're willing to go. And the closer you move towards it, the more you get back of what that grind took from you, even after all of these years. That whole line from disease all the way to resilient health, that is a path that you can actually walk. And I actually mapped the exact steps that I took to move from dysfunction towards resilient health. And I turned that entire framework into a free course that I just want to give away to everybody here. Okay? So I do this so that you can start rebuilding your own health before the grind takes more of you. The link is in the description. Like I said, it won't cost you $1, completely free, straight to your inbox. To better health with better science. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.